with the original visit to the book about the moral molecule, but it's largely with the author describing what a fantastic fellow he is to have done this research. And I figure since most of you have seen the original visit to the moral molecule, I would leave that one out and leave some time for discussion about the suggestions for actually doing something with it. Let's see. Ooh, Lord, it's almost 9 o'clock.
Yeah, we have 3 or 4 minutes.
You know, something that I was doing some research. I saw a biography on Tolstoy last night, and it occurs to me that the moral molecule topic can be possibly affected by fatigue with trying to solve the right wrong problems in life. That you can be so overwhelmed by determining what to do and how to go about your life and navigating it in terms of your moral compass. It can just wear you down and not be able to really function the way I think you, when you're young you can function, but it kind of gets worn down as you get older. I know that Vonnegut himself, I mean, I think maybe you told me you don't like Vonnegut, but
That is true.
he had this thing about, of course, he was an atheist, but he thought he used the term God is indifferent, and I think that if you have a God is indifferent attitude or perspective, then right and wrong becomes kind of a non-issue. Things just happen.
Well, let me see.
That sounds like the beliefs of some of our founding fathers, who were many of whom were deists. They believed in God, but not a hands-on type of God.
Right.
They weren't Christians.
They had to have a first cause, sometimes ontological explanation for the first, the first domino to be thrown, to be tipped over. But after that, it's just everything's out of control.
Well, I am reminded of a couple of the things. The first one being the story that ends, it's turtles all the way down. Most of you have encountered that religious quip, I assume. People looking for first causes. But I'm also thinking of the poet.
Peeling the onion is another one.
The poet who was talking about the American Civil War, and I can't remember which poet it was, but there's a quote that goes, "A man said to the universe, 'Sir, I exist.' 'However,' replied the universe, 'the fact has not created in me a sense of obligation.'"
Yeah.
And I don't think any of the oxytocin research I have seen goes into the I'm tired of fighting sort of thing to account for bad behavior. The only thing I can think of in that context is that age tends to lead to good behavior in the sense that high testosterone levels block some of the oxytocin receptors, meaning that young men who have about twice the testosterone of old men are more likely to do bad and violent things. Whereas young men who commit to and live with a woman and then live with their children, this lowers their youthful testosterone levels, and they tend to be better all-round citizens. In fact, one of the points that I make in the bit about oxytocin research is that society has developed a mechanism for controlling male testosterone levels, in the sense that if you get most of the young men married and living with women, you get a fairly mellow society. But if war is brewing, you draft all those young men and put them in barracks or in army camps where they are living with other young men. This greatly raises their testosterone level and makes them better soldiers. You just have to re-civilize them when they come home after the war. So there's a balance there, but it tends to it tends to go around the testosterone balance. And
Depend on, you mean? Be related to?
be there, related to. There's also research that indicates that high levels of oxytocin do not block violent behavior if the violent behavior is directed toward defending mates, children, and very close kin. So there's kind of a
Threshold.
yeah, they run into that with the voles on which they did the original oxytocin experience, which I'm going to talk about. But
So
like most hormonal behavior, it's complicated.
So oxytocin allows violent defense, but not violent offense. Is that what you're saying?
Well, it seems like they draw,
That's,
you draw the line at some point where you say, this is what you can, you can say what you want to, but screw with my family, you're gonna get it.
Yeah. And okay, higher levels of testosterone. And by the way, he makes the point in the book somewhere that this is not strictly a male thing. He said in some of our experiments, the person with the highest testosterone was female. So, you definitely have testosterone mediated behavior amongst females. It just tends to be considerably less than amongst males. But this not blocking defensive behavior towards mates and children shows up very highly in the female of the species, as Kipling noted. Anyway, I think it's time to start this.
Yes.
And most of what I hope our discussion will be about will be on the 5% of the human population who basically have no oxytocin receptors and who are, emotionally speaking, sociopaths. And I would like to look at the notion of A, cutting down the number of people who end up that way, and B, controlling their behavior in society to some extent. So let's see if I can dredge up my
Carol, is there a prescription for oxytocin? Is it a fabricated chemical?
I don't know about right now. When our hero, Dr. Zach, was doing his oxytocin research, he ended up having to do off-label research because the only oxytocin that was prescribed at that time for human beings was for, okay, a strong dose of oxytocin can be used to precipitate labor in a female who is overdue for having that kid.
Right.
And in fact, before this book came out, that was the only use of oxytocin that I had ever heard of, was, to create the onset of labor. And also it was used to facilitate breastfeeding for women who had had the baby and were having trouble, who didn't want to have a bottle baby but were having trouble breastfeeding. And you could administer oxytocin to them. In that case, it was administered with a nasal inhalant, like nose drops for allergies. And
I would like to add that
yes,
what's normally used for that is a synthetic form of oxytocin called Pitocin. So there are synthetic forms of oxytocin, and Pitocin is a commonly used one to help childbirth and breastfeeding.
okay. I guess when the guy who wrote the book was talking about it, he
Pitocin's
just
been around a
referred to
long
it as
time.
oxytocin.
Pitocin's been around a long time, at least 30,
Yes.
40 years.
I mean, I was a doctor's daughter, and I remember, articles about the use of oxytocin to induce childbirth. But people thought that was all it was good for. But it turns out that in all female mammals, it facilitates bonding with the young. It facilitates taking care of the young, even if you're in very difficult circumstances and you have to kill people or run away from people in order to keep your young alive. It very definitely facilitates mother-child bonding in all female mammals. And depending on the species, it facilitates paternal bonding with the children. And this is where life gets interesting, because the original oxytocin research that was done by a woman named Briggs, I believe, back in the 80s, was done on a species of vole. And vole are kind of like mice. They look a lot like mice, only they're plumper and cuter and don't have long naked tails. And she managed to find two different species of vole, one of which had very high paternal bonding. The male of the species mated with a particular female and stayed with her, took care of the kids as they were growing up, and greatly improved the survivability of the species, whereas the other male, with whom, they both had a common ancestor back when, genetically, but they had split off into two different species of vole, one of whom had a male with high oxytocin levels. The other had a male with practically no oxytocin. And it led to important and significant survival significant behavior on the part of the male voles with lots of oxytocin. And then when they did the experiments on other mammals, it turns out that you don't just have lots or none amongst the males. You have a variety. And now let's go on to the
Can you can you take a quick question?
Sure.
Yeah. So I slept in today. That's a good thing, I guess. Um, I'm remembering back in the 80s, I'm gonna say, when we had rapists and pedophiles, sexual predators, and they offered them release with chemical castration. Is that the chemical they
No,
use? It's not the chemical castration
no.
medication.
I
Okay.
believe what they did there was essentially eliminate testosterone.
Well, but what chemical did they use to eliminate testosterone? They didn't do that. I mean, a few states did physical castrations, but it was pretty controversial. But it was the way you could get out of prison. Um, and then you haven't heard much about it lately, but it was a real thing, chemical castration. In other words, it lowered dramatically your sex drive.
Yes, and it tended to ruin a lot of other things.
Right, but it was not oxytocin. That's all. That was my only question.
Definitely not oxytocin.
Okay, no.
Um, it was also much to the detriment of the medical profession, at one time used to curb homosexual behavior. They did this to
Any
Alan.
any, any quote aberrant behavior that was judged to be aberrant.
Well, they did this to Alan Turing.
Yeah, yeah.
Um, because he was after the war found to engage in homosexual behavior and
And that was considered a security threat because it was blackmailable.
yes,
That's the major reason. Homosexuality's been around for 2 million years, and in Homo type people, Homo sapiens. Yeah, all right.
yeah, although the roots are different. Homo as in Homo sapiens, I believe, comes from the Latin. And
Homo,
homo as in homosexual comes from the Greek.
I think you're right. Yeah, it's
It
a
means two different
kind of
things.
like a homophone or like the same letters, but yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Okay, now I have got to figure out how to export this little turkey. So hang on a minute. I take it you guys can't see that now.
No, if you're trying to show something, you have to share it.
Okay. Well, I'm trying to remember, and I think
At my age, trying to remember occupies a quarter of my day.
Yeah.
You go to the
okay.
bottom of the Zoom screen, hit share screen, then it'll bring up your screens and you pick the one to share and share it.
There you go. Something's happened. There you go.
Yep.
Yep.
Okay. Can you see that now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, good. I'm glad. And then I think there's a way here to make this take up the entire.
Double click, I believe.
Nope. Just a moment.
F5.
I think you go to slideshow and you select, what is it?
I double click the pane at the left and do it that way. But
How about that?
That's it.
Got it.
Okay.
what did you hit? Just in case I want to remember.
Blast. Uh,
You did it from slideshow menu, yeah.
yes, I did it from slideshow and I hit from the beginning. In the beginning, Carole said. Okay. And this is all talking about modifying human nature. That's where we're heading. Okay. Now, at least from my standpoint, this is the book that started it all. And this is Dr. Paul Zak, the fellow who really thinks that oxytocin research makes you popular with the ladies. He was, yeah, he thought very highly of himself. And I noticed that he actually got this in the title of the book, The Source of Love and Prosperity, because Zak went on to do a bunch of economic research that indicated that the level of oxytocin in a particular society indicated how trusting that society was amongst unrelated individuals, and that the more trusting a society was between individuals, the more prosperous, economically prosperous, that society turned out to be. So, now here we get to Sue Carter. I'm sorry, it was not Briggs. Sue Carter at the University of Illinois in the 80s. And she did the first research on oxytocin as other than a helping childbirth. And what she found to work with were these cute little critters called voles. And she had two different species with overlapping territories. And the ladies of both species were, as most mammal females are, good mothers. They had lots of oxytocin. They bonded with their offspring and defended their offspring. But let's see, the female meadow voles got no help from daddy. They didn't even live with daddy. You know, they simply mated with a male and had the kids in their own burrow, took care of the kids all by themselves. And this led to the problem that, okay, like most rodents, Mommy Vole had to go out foraging every day to eat and drink. And that meant she left her babies undefended back in the burrow. And every once in a while, Mom came back to the burrow and the babies had been eaten by a larger marauding mammal, a fox or a stoat, or, you know, the sort of thing that lives on rodents. And that's obviously an evolutionary problem, you know? You get too many of your kids eaten and you just don't do well evolution-wise. The prairie voles, Mommy vole mated with daddy mole and lived with him. And indeed, the two of them bonded before there were ever children. You know, they did all sorts of experiments to indicate that the cute little daddy prairie vole would rather mate with his mate that he lived with than with some other lady vole, whom he encountered. And, he was known to ignore other lady voles who were in heat and, keep on feeding, eating and drinking with his companion. And of course, when they had the little ones, Mommy would go out foraging, leaving Daddy at home to take care of the kids. And then she would come back, feed the kids while he went out foraging. And this led to lots of evolutionary success. Well, first of all, the little ones were not getting eaten. They always had somebody at home in the burrow taking care of them. Mom and Dad took turns foraging. And secondly, they got a certain advantage, particularly when they were very young, that when Mommy Meadow Vole left the kids at home and went out foraging, the children were not only defenseless, but they got kind of cold. Because, normally when Mommy Vole was there, they would huddle up close to her, feeding, and she kept them warm. When she left, they were, they tended to have 3 to 5 children in a litter, and there's 3 to 5 little voles all shivering and cold. Nobody to keep them warm. So it turned out that the prairie vole children, who had the father to keep them warm while Mom was gone, grew faster. They were not having to put enormous amounts of the energy they took in by feeding just in staying warm. It could all go to growing. And that was a second evolutionary advantage, at least, during the month or so when the children were very young. And here we have pictures of the two different species, as far as I could tell, look exactly alike. You can't tell a male prairie vole from a male meadow vole except by his behavior.
I think the term is subspecies, but I could be wrong.
Yeah. No, actually, it is not subspecies, it is species.
Because they cannot.
They made a
mate with each
definite
other?
point of this.
I like chimpanzees and bonobos. Yeah.
Does that
Yes.
mean they cannot mate with each other?
That would be the implication. I
The
mean, generally speaking, that's part of the definition of a species.
Except the dogs can mate with coyotes and vice versa.
and wolves.
Well,
And
actually,
wolves.
Canis lupus and Canis domesticus, whatever it is, are the same species, biologically speaking. And the definition is actually that they cannot mate and produce fertile offspring.
Well, but they
Right.
can.
2 different species, if they're close enough, can mate and produce offspring, but the offspring are sterile.
It's like mules and donkeys and horses.
Right, horses and
Yep.
donkeys can produce sterile mules.
Or
Right.
Ligons and Tigons and Ligers. One of them can
Yes.
produce, I can't remember which.
But supposedly, part of the you are a separate species distinction is that you cannot mate and produce fertile offspring.
So the question
So
immediately arises, why don't the prairie voles outcompete or replace the meadow voles?
they were doing so.
But
But the overlapping habitat.
Mhm.
You know, they had some overlapping habitat, and generally speaking, the prairie voles were doing a better job of how many offspring they produced for the next generation. Okay. This is a, sort of tinker toy model of the oxytocin molecule. It's cute. And there's a benzene ring over here, and lots of different atoms. And in humans, oxytocin is known to facilitate childbirth and breastfeeding. In the normal female, where their high levels of oxytocin are produced as the birth approaches, she has no problem with birthing the child on time and with breastfeeding the child. And that tends to be mediated by oxytocin, and doses of artificial oxytocin will help if she's lacking. Yeah, Tom.
just going back to the voles for a minute,
Oh, sure.
it's interesting about that, but you didn't say much about how oxytocin is involved there. Do the meadow voles have less oxytocin?
As far as I could tell, the meadowvole males had essentially no oxytocin, whereas the meadowvole females had the high oxytocin levels of most mammals. Does that help?
So you're saying the meadow vole males had less oxytocin than the prairie vole males?
Yes. The difference in the two species was all in the males.
But it involved oxytocin.
Yes.
Okay.
I mean, they actually drew blood from the little critters and tested it.
Okay.
Dean,
Uh,
by the way, I can't see all of you. So
well, you have to unshare and reshare, but yeah. Or yeah.
I can see Dean and me and Tom and Eric and Stan
I
and
believe
David.
I see 8 on my side, Barbara.
Well, Dean, why don't you let me know if somebody besides you has their
I
hand
will,
up?
or Tom will. Yeah. So my question was, I'm a bird guy. I'm a nature guy. I'm watching Big Cats 24/7 right now on PBS. Just amazing. It is. It have bird species been studied? As in, there are numerous species of birds where the male is the primary feeder, babysitter, and the female is the primary hunter, and also related to the birds that mate for life, period. Has there been any studies in birds and vis-a-vis oxytocin?
I have never heard of any. That
Right.
doesn't mean there hasn't been.
Right.
But and Actually, I have never heard of any bird species um, where the male is the primary caretaker.
Well, I'm not saying primary. I'm talking a good. Am I unmuted? Yeah, a good house husband. It's no. I've watched thousands and thousands of videos of birds and had birds
Yeah.
and read.
As a for instance, cardinals, who are my favorite birds, um, raise two broods every year. And for the first brood, he and she build a nest. They mate, she lays the eggs, and she sits on the eggs, and he goes out and brings food back to her.
That's the norm.
And when the eggs hatch, she leaves. She leaves him to feed the babies and goes and builds another nest, remates with him to lay a second brood of eggs.
Genetic diversity. Females seek that also.
But I don't know. Well, as I say, I don't know if there have been studies of oxytocin amongst birds. Anyway,
I do have a comment on that.
yeah.
Um, birds don't have oxytocin, but they have mesotocin, which is the equivalent, and it does regulate or affect their behavior.
I'm sorry, it regulates what?
Their behavior as far as pair bonding and aggression and parental care and so forth. So it's a homologous type of hormone. It's not exactly the same.
And what was the name of it again?
Mesotocin.
No, all right.
H. Tom.
Yeah, we're calling on
Me.
you, Tom.
Yeah. Yeah, I was just looking that up. It's a neuropeptide that functions similar to oxytocin in mammals. It is found in many vertebrate species, including birds, reptiles, and amphibians. And there is some kind of a movement that it should not be called mesotocin, but should be called oxytocin. Because of the very slight difference and because of it seems to act just like it, only differently.
It's where right. It's birds are a little bit older than us by a few 100 million years. So yeah, it was it was the prototype or whatever you want to call it.
But they
And
just flip the OH off the benzene ring or something?
yeah,
It is chemically different.
it can be identically, you can distinguish them in the lab, but they don't seem to, they seem to be effectively the same as far as what they do. I don't know of any research of administering one to the other to see if that actually works that way.
So we've established that warm-blooded vertebrates have some kind of hormone that helps bonding and family type raising, caring for the young.
Yeah.
It'd be interesting to find out if other vertebrates, such as fish and reptiles, have something similar.
Reptiles and amphibians have mesotoxin. Yeah, the other one.
I think it's
Like those.
tocin, if you go by the analogy with oxytocin.
Tocin.
But
Mesotocin.
Yeah. Okay, just like birds. Okay.
but there are
Is there an opposite chemistry or a dissimilar chemistry called vasopressin?
Vasopressin?
That is the kind of an anti-oxytocin type chemistry?
Well, vasopressin, I think, affects your blood vessels.
Yeah, that raises your blood pressure, doesn't it?
It has to do with getting an erection, I believe, in males. I believe. I could be wrong.
Well, that would tend to be facilitated by a raise in blood pressure.
Yep.
I don't know. Stan.
Well, he just asked his question,
Oh,
so we can continue.
okay. Now, oxytocin in humans facilitates all of these things, and the two non-reproductive related ones tend to be highly significant in human nature, and that is high levels of oxytocin tend to facilitate trust between unrelated people, people who are not kin, people who are not mated. And it greatly facilitates empathy. And empathy can be defined as the ability to put yourself in the other person's shoes, and to understand what they're feeling. A normally empathic person, if they see a video of someone being struck, they will flinch back. You know, they will feel the impact of violence, even if it's simulated. And if they see loving behavior, will think that's a good idea, you know? Gee, he has somebody who loves him, you know, that type of thing.
It's the awe factor when we see something cute, that childlike.
Yeah. And it turns out that people, well, we're going to get to that here. Okay, one of the most important discoveries is that testosterone works as an oxytocin antagonist.
So there you go. We're on to we're on to testosterone poisoning syndrome. Yeah, I get it.
Okay, now very briefly, base testosterone levels amongst normal people are approximately 10 times higher in men than in women. Although testosterone is very important in women. I mean, for instance, in female sports teams, the winners end up with much higher testosterone levels than the losers. In soccer, in any competitive female sport, testosterone is very significant. And normal baseline testosterone levels are about 2 times higher in young men than in old men. And male testosterone levels begin to decline significantly in the 40s and 50s. But with very young men, those, 2 times higher testosterone levels are significantly lowered if they live with a woman, and even more significantly lowered if they live with a woman and children, especially young children. Normal men are very protective of
Wait.
young children.
Normal men?
Yes,
I mean, average.
no, in this case, I mean men who are not lacking in oxytocin,
Okay.
Which is the
because there
number.
is a mutation that produces men with essentially no oxytocin. And that is, in this context, abnormal. So I don't mean
And-
statistically average, I mean
Correct.
non-mutated.
And statistically, those males are more likely to do what society would call bad things, right?
They have a higher tendency toward violent behavior.
There you go.
Now, some of them can certainly take care of all of their need for violence by engaging in sports, let's say,
Or video games today.
or video games. And it is not necessarily a predictor of bad behavior, antisocial behavior, but it helps.
The idea that sports dissipates male aggression, I don't believe is true. It's contradicted by the fact that most of the big riots and violence associated with soccer games around Europe occurs after the game. You'd think if the sport and the rooting for one team or another dissipated that bad trait harmlessly, then they would be more peaceable afterward. But it's the opposite. It gets them stimulated.
Well,
Oh.
it has certainly been demonstrated that in most physical sports, the winner's testosterone level goes up, and after the event, the
And
winner's testosterone levels are high, the loser's testosterone levels are lowered, and this, to a lesser extent, this is true of the fans.
and
If you're rooting for your team and they win, you show more testosterone. If you're rooting for your team and they lose,
of
your
course.
testosterone level goes down.
And can I interject? I just before Tom. Yeah, so at a football soccer event, adrenaline comes into play too. The players get to work off their adrenaline on the field. The people in the stands, other than acting like hooligans, have no way to work off that. And I believe testosterone and adrenaline relate. I'm pretty sure they do.
Well, it is certainly true that testosterone will surge temporarily with anger, fear, the emotions that tend
Fight
toward.
or flight, fight or flight.
Yep.
Tom.
And we note that sufficiently high levels of testosterone can cause some men to act like people with no oxytocin receptors. And that is generally a real bad idea. Tom,
Uh, yeah, I had one question, but now I have two questions.
okay.
One is, well, the Greeks had this idea of catharsis. So if you view a play that has violence in it, then the idea was that that'll get you all worked up, and then you'll feel better after that, in a way, because of the cathartic effect. It'll remove your aggression somehow. Uh, I think the fact that we're exposed to violence all the time now, we don't experience the cathartic effect. But anyway, that's one of my points. But I was going to ask originally about oxytocin receptors and producers in the body. My understanding is that it's not totally genetic, that it can also be affected environmentally. For example,
Yes.
if the young offspring does not experience a mother that is, maternal and has lots of oxytocin herself.
I tell you what, we're about to get to this in
will.
about 2 slides.
Okay, good.
So,
Then I'll put my hand down and defer to H-Town.
Yeah, the thing about theater and violence is that the violence is displayed, but there's also the balancing in theater. Whereas in modern society, we are exposed to huge amounts of violence, but there's no catharsis. There's no cleansing. There's no setting it right.
Right.
It's just,
Yeah.
you see, this person is dead. You might occasionally see somebody in handcuffs being taken away.
We're numb to it through media. In the
Yeah.
newspaper days, we read about violence, and there were violent times in newspaper
Yeah.
days, and we processed it.
Yeah, but
offline.
but
now it's injected into our brains.
it's now, well, I don't want to say it's a conspiracy, but the catharsis is concealed. You might see someone arrested, but you don't see them living out their life in prison.
Right.
You don't get a hint of it.
and
It's just
instant
and so
gratification.
you get this unbalanced thing. I
it is
hate to say that theater was right, but theater was right.
Theater was right.
It
So
is
both-
certainly true that surges of oxytocin or surges of testosterone can be produced by vicarious things, things seen on screens, things, where there is no physical thing happening.
But I would imagine also by reading books, right?
Say again?
I would imagine as a young child, I read books that had, were graphic in all kinds of ways, right? And then your mind starts processing Lord of the Flies or,
Yeah.
Yeah.
And you have to realize that, okay, when all the experiments on this have been done, okay. In other words, the experiments that were done that indicated that surges of oxytocin could be produced by something seen on a screen, you have got to have somebody there who is taking blood from the people who you're testing and centrifuging it down and freezing it for testing. And then these people will engage in whatever activity you're talking about. Like watching a scary movie or watching a, sappy, lovey movie. And then somebody comes and takes blood again to check the hormone levels. So it's a little complicated doing these experiments.
And I keep thinking about A Clockwork Orange. That was the experiment there.
Yeah.
And it has definitely been shown that moving pictures can create more of a surge, more of a hormonal surge than, say, books or,
Of course.
yeah.
Eric has his hand up her head.
Yeah, I was going to say here, well, there's some, I don't know if it's legal or just a general moral consensus that the media should limit the amount of blood and gore they display and sell to compete. It is not true in Latin America, where when my friend and neighbor was in Mexico City, where they had one of their, unfortunately, many bloody, sadistic butcherings in the public streets there. They had right away, they had big color pictures of it all over, splashed all over the major newspapers, all the blood and gore fully displayed. That's apparently the norm there.
Yeah. And yeah, there's a lot, Latin America, Aztecs, Mayans, they have a thousands and thousands of year history of being successful by being gory.
Yeah.
And by the way, I watch a lot of real media, like TV, right? I record it. And so now the standard line is just the usual warning, some of this content may be disturbing. Well, that doesn't inoculate one towards what they're about to see at all. Hearing that, it gets the children out
It
of it.
simply produces avoidance in some people.
You can
Yeah.
avoid it if it bothers you. That's all it means. You can not
Right.
watch it.
That's my motto. If you don't like something, don't watch it.
Okay,
On
now,
the other hand, in Latin America, bullfights are nowhere near as common as they used to be. They're prohibited in some places now.
Well, yeah, and we had the clean bullfights. I used to go down to bullfights in Tijuana, and we had the clean ones where they shook hands with the bull after the. Literally, and a lot of people hated those, and I think they brought back. I'm not sure about Spain, but yeah, there's something about killing that bull. I don't like it, but it creates an opportunity for other bulls to come up and
I
and they
root for the
idolize
bulls.
the bulls.
Yeah, I root for the bulls.
Oh, I always root for the bulls. Yeah, nothing
Okay,
better than a
let's move
toreador
on
being
now.
impaled on a horn
Yeah.
thrown into the stands. Yeah.
well, it's less gory than the bullfights they used to have in Crete.
Well, I thought they were just, flipping or grabbing their horns and doing flips around, and it wasn't involved just killing the bull.
No, in the original Cretan bullfights, the bull was never killed, but
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
many of the people were.
Oh, yeah, it was like a test of bravery and skill, athletic
The
skill.
Colosseum, it was, and people wanted the people killed in the Colosseum.
Okay,
Okay,
I
let's
brought
move
this up.
on because I
Let's move
really
on.
want to get
Yeah.
to.
Okay, go ahead.
Hmm. Anyway, I really want to get to the essentially 5% of the population whose bodies do not produce a surge of oxytocin at all. So, consider most of this background. Okay, historically, youthful, high testosterone males have been a problem. And they have been a particular problem in polygynous societies. And polygyny is way down here, where one man is allowed several wives. And there's always this biggish problem in a polygynous society, because for every male who has 4 wives, there are 3 males who have no wife. 4 being the standard that you're allowed in a traditional Muslim marriage. And this is a problem. I mean, you have 3/4 of the youthful male population can't get at women. And they have a strong tendency to wreck your society. And
Well, they can get at women, but not in a way that society would want them to.
well, yes. And for some reason that I have never been able to figure, most seriously polygynous societies are also really down on things like prostitution that would at least allow, some access to some women for your youthful, high testosterone, unmarried man. So, at any rate, traditionally, polygynous societies tend to export these excess young men to the army, where they get busy and attack the neighbors, who eventually band together and try to put a stop to the whole society. It tends to be counterproductive for you as a society to be polygynous. Successful historical solution to the excess youthful male problem has been monogamy. If you can get, and we're talking statistically here, but essentially get all the young high testosterone males married, living with a woman and children, you drop those testosterone levels. And this leads to a serious, the young men are working to the advantage of the society they're in rather than to the disadvantage of it. They are working to keep the society going and to build a future for their family. And as I mentioned briefly before, with clever management, the society can vary testosterone levels short term. You draft all the young men who are married and have lowered testosterone levels. You throw them into barracks and army camps, and they're all living with other men, and they're miserable and frustrated, and they make much better soldiers. Dean, you have some comment? You're
Yeah, that was my question, because it's great in a Pollyanna world that males are monogamous and they take care of the kids, but what if a society what if the people on the other side of the border aren't playing by the same rules? Then you need males and females that will defend. I mean, defense is a whole lot of what any species is about.
Yep. Well, I try to make the point here, but he makes the point overwhelmingly in the book that there are times and places and situations where you very definitely need these youthful, high testosterone males. And part of it is defending the society, and part of it is, I mean, there's even stuff like, high testosterone males tend to be better at hunting, killing animals. I mean, they're more drawn to it and, they like it. And if you are, like a hunting and gathering society, if you're a small tribal society, you need people who are bringing home the meat. So yeah, you don't want to get rid of the youthful high testosterone males, and
Well-
you don't necessarily want to have all of them married and living with children, because you need them for various things. H. Hum.
I noticed the listing didn't provide what I think of it as the traditional poly society, which is, say, men can have 4 wives and wives can have 4 husbands, and there isn't a necessary correlation between those two.
I do not believe there has
Or
ever.
is this my misunderstanding of what was meant by a poly society?
Okay. We're going back to here with the definitions. Monogamy is obvious. Polygamy is multiple marriage partners. And historically, polygamy has always been divided into polygyny and polyandry. I don't think there has ever been a society that's mixed. It has always
Polyandry, you
been.
mean polygamy, not polyandry and monogamy.
And Carole, at this point, I wanted to ask: is there an evolutionary reason why the species of always break down a 50-50 ratio of males to females? Is it because you need the males to defend to defend against other species for 50%? Because it seems like they could be asymmetrical. You could have you could have 75 female to 25, or is it, or maybe that's something a luxury that an apex species could afford. For example, a 75 to 25 ratio, or 80 to 20 a ratio of females to males. Is there an evolutionary reason why every slices down to 50 everywhere? Thank you.
I don't know, but it's pretty damn common.
Yeah.
I mean, can you think of a species that has an uneven male-female ratio born?
Humans.
Yeah, insects.
Actually, humans, there's slightly more
Humans.
males than females born. And my understanding was that that was a natural thing because males tend to live shorter lives, but I'm not sure.
Seems like that would. It seems like that would take care of the mate shortage problem.
It's only 1 or
Probably.
2% difference.
Yeah, it's about 106 to 100 male to female births, I think.
But if it was if it was 80 to 20, that would take care of the mate shortage problem in polygamy. I
It's
would
nowhere
think.
near that though.
Yeah, it's not but yeah, it's not nowhere either. But if it were 80 to 20, it would be like a 4-to-1 ratio, and that would take care of the mate shortage problem.
About 6% more males are born than females.
Yep.
It tends to be, it's not even that uneven.
And it seems like in most species, Darwin's plan was to head toward monogamy, right? By more or less in most species. Insects are off the chart. It can be 100 to 1 or whatever, but we're not insects. We're a lot of things, but we're not insects.
But are far more
Even
females
though
than
we share
males.
90% of our DNA with a fruit fly.
Yeah.
But yeah, it kind of seems like monogamy, a balance of male and female, seems to have an evolutionary advantage across many species.
Um,
Well, what if we consciously went towards an asymmetric female to male ratio through fertility clinics? Then
Well,
that would seem like that would take care of the male.
Now you're talking about Big Brother, which is what yeah. Mm-hmm.
Well, that's not necessarily. That could be a conscious choice.
Oh, absolutely,
Yeah.
it could be.
actually,
It's Big Brother's social media version.
in
No,
society,
Big Brother is the government.
okay,
Big
I'd like
Brother
to get
can
this
also
sentence
be
out, please.
societal norms.
Dean, give it a break.
Okay.
In societies where it has been a conscious choice, and one thinks China in the last few generations, where
Henry.
where they have limited the number of children that a couple can have,
fewer women, yeah.
there has been, again, when the couple has a conscious choice, they have tended to favor male babies. And then that society runs into the problem of excessive unmarried youthful males. And China ran into quite a problem with that.
Isn't that because because male babies are more valued than female babies, or if that's not the case?
Yes. In other words,
not the case. Yeah.
My Chinese friend said that has diminished somewhat in China because, like, for at least for a while in the 90s and early 2000s, because girls are more suitable to sitting at long periods at a factory, desk table or whatever, doing things, assembling things with their hands and so on, and that women are more suitable for that kind of work. And also that if they're attractive, they can easily get jobs making relatively good money dancing in nightclubs and so on.
Right, but you have an incredibly long social tradition that girls join their husbands' families.
Yeah, that's a factor too. So
And
you lose your daughter, and who's going to support you? And since China, contrary to their theory, they have no social network for old people. Basically, the kids are expected to support their old parents.
but
you lose your daughter to your son-in-law's family.
exactly.
So you only have one.
This is the primary reason that they ended up. There was a time when China had a one-child policy, and it was a drastic population limitation policy, but basically it dragged China into the first world.
Yeah.
And so in some sense it was helpful.
They had to have it almost for a while there. It would have been
But
overpopulated.
in the urban areas where it was possible to choose the sex of the child, there was a strong tendency to have a son as your only child.
And they had
Then
convenient
shit, the
laws
son
that,
grew up and he had nobody to marry.
and they made it was convenient with a Chinese law that abortion is legal up to birth, and conveniently, birth is defined when the head comes out. So they would flip the babies around, and so their genitals would come out first, and they could still be killed if they didn't like what they saw.
Happened
Legally.
hundreds of thousands of times in China.
Yeah, they could do that legally. And of course, it happened a lot too illegally
Yes,
after the
but,
baby was out.
well, there was also, in China at that time, and in, oddly enough, medieval Europe, a significantly high female infanticide rate.
Yeah.
Uh, we know about it in China from observation, firsthand accounts, and we know about it in medieval Europe, oddly enough, because while human beings tend to be born almost 50-50, there's a little bit of a push in males, but it rarely gets higher than, like 1%, 49-51. But there were times in medieval Europe where half again as many boys were christened as girls. So they made the assumption that they were, you would have a baby christened within a week of it being born. And that has a very strong implication for female infanticide.
I think India has a case of not allowing females to live.
Well, sometimes they throw the wives on the funeral pyres of their predeceased husbands, among other things. Yeah.
That did not have much statistical impact.
Let's get back to the topic.
Okay. So, but I have never historically heard of a society that allowed polygyny and polyandry at the same time. Has anyone else? It just does not seem to happen. But certainly there are polygynous societies in existence to this day. And there are a couple of polyandrous societies left over in Nepal and I think it's like southern India. Maybe it's northern India. But anyway, I've never heard of a society that allowed both.
In fiction, Heinlein wanders into that in
Oh,
several of
yes,
his novels, but that's fiction.
well, and he postulated a society with a desperate lack of females.
Uh,
That led to mostly statistically polyandry, but also a mix.
we have 40 minutes left.
Yeah, okay, let's get on here. Okay, Zach's experiments found various ways to increase oxytocin levels in test subjects. There's the nose drops method. And he found that, and again, you have to realize that all of these increases in oxytocin levels were being measured by taking blood from the subject before and after. So, it's a little bit difficult. But they found that friendly physical contact tends to produce a surge of oxytocin. But again, it has to be wanted physical contact. It can't be somebody groping you in the subway. And the two that were most interesting were long distance interaction with a loved one. And Zach tells the story of doing some of these before and after oxytocin experiments. And I think this one was done in Korea in conjunction with the Korean broadcasting system. And what they had was a bunch of students where they did the before and after blood test, and then in between, the students were allowed to simply get out on the internet and look around, do anything they wanted on the internet, but keep a record of where they went and what they did. And then there was one male teenager, who had 150% increase in his oxytocin with whatever he was doing on screen. And I mean, you have to realize that the blood platelet testing is done yes, the blood drawing is done before and after the experiment, and you're in contact with the people. But getting the results is done back home in your lab. And when Zach got this one result of the guy whose oxytocin level skyrocketed, he said, find out what he was doing, and I'll bet you he was either interacting with his mother or his girlfriend. And it turned out the guy was posting to his girlfriend's Facebook page. So, yeah. But they also, in addition to interaction at a distance with a loved one, you can have a well-told, emotion-evoking story. And they found out here again that movies are more evocatory of oxytocin than reading or somebody telling you a story. That, the more realistic it is, the more it can affect your oxytocin levels. But you can get, by, totally non-physical means, no hugs, no drugs, a surge that the person's body produces, a ton of oxytocin, in response to a purely intellectual experience.
Did they check for oxytocin levels for adult what if they watched adult content up or down, or and also prolactin going up and cortisol going down related to that? Thank you.
Well, if by adult content you
Porn,
mean
yeah.
sexual content, is that what you're getting at?
Yeah, porn.
That tended to produce a surge of testosterone. I can't recall if it had if it had an oxytocin effect.
Okay.
But I have the feeling that porn does not really kick your love mechanism. It tends to
Lust
increase
mechanism.
testosterone rather than oxytocin.
And is that universal? Maybe it'll do it for some, but not for others.
I don't
Love-
know.
Don't know. Okay.
I can
And then
only tell you that it was stated in the book that
okay.
Exposure to pornography tended to produce a surge of testosterone
Testosterone. Okay.
and not oxytocin. But
Mm.
beyond that, I can't tell you.
They didn't say anything about prolactin and cortisol levels. You don't know about that either.
Wait a minute. Prolactin has to do with breastfeeding, doesn't it?
Or it's well, cortisol stress. I heard that prolactin goes up when you have sex. That prolactin levels go up, and that it's one of the healthy benefits of sex. For example, prolactin goes up and cortisol goes down. Is what I've heard.
Um,
But you haven't heard. Okay.
don't know.
Okay. Thanks.
The only thing I can remember is one instance where he got permission to do this before and after blood testing at somebody's wedding. And they tested, before the wedding, everybody's blood levels. And then these people actually went through the ceremony with all the attendants and the audience and everything like that. And then they took everybody's blood levels right after the ceremony. And he found that the highest oxytocin level increase was with the bride. The second highest was the bride's mother. And, you went on down in the sort of a solar system surrounding the bride. But the groom's oxytocin surge was somewhat balanced by a high testosterone surge. So he figured the groom was looking forward to the night. And this was producing a high testosterone surge, but nobody else was. Anyway.
Okay, we have a couple more hands up. So,
Tom.
Something you mentioned a couple minutes ago about reading books versus seeing a movie or something.
Yes.
The effects on oxytocin. That would suggest the visual pathways have more effect than the auditory pathways. I'm not so sure that's necessarily true, because music itself can evoke strong emotions. So I'd like to see a little more about the research in that.
Yeah.
I was going to speak to that myself. Having a speech class that I took years ago, but I think that the analysis is still correct, that when you're talking about total communication, it's split into three categories: the words, the actual words or the text that you're using, your vocal intonation, and your facial expression. And the text only conveys 4% of the message, total communication. And then between facial expression and vocal intonation, it's about a 50-50 split. And I think that you're confusing, Tom Walsh, I think you were confusing text with audio. And there's
No, I specifically mentioned music.
right, but soundtrack versus script, it's like a script versus soundtrack kind of thing. Now, the other thing I was going to mention about, I think that you can maybe use the word lust for testosterone and love for oxytocin. If you're looking for the Shakespearean or literary correlations between the words and the chemistry, one of my favorite
I rather like that distinction.
one of my favorite songs that a local band produced was called "Meet Me on the Corner of Lust and Love."
Yes. And C.S. Lewis made an interesting distinction. He said that love enchants the universe. If you are in love, even if you can't have the object of your love, the whole world looks better, seems better, feels better. Whereas lust disenchants the universe. If you cannot have the object of your lust, everything looks worse.
Dean.
And C.S. Lewis, of course, was one of the only poets I can think of who wrote uxorious love poetry. He wrote love
Uxorious?
poetry.
Wait.
She's going to explain it. Just give her a
Okay.
break.
Okay.
Uxorious means husbandly.
Hmm.
And it was most specifically to his wife, as opposed to women in general or loved women in general. I can think of one very short one that went, Lady, to this fair breast I know but one fair rival, and to the heart beneath it none. That's kind of nice. Sexy and at the same time loving. Anyway,
Dean, you had something?
Yeah. You because of you, Tom. You were talking about senses and pathways to the brain, and I know it's true for me, but music and sense tend to evoke memories much better than any other senses we have. I mean, I live in the world of song lyrics now. You know, there are connections in the brain with music and with scent that bring back memories from 50, 60 years ago.
this is certainly true of scent for practically everybody, and maybe music doesn't hit it quite as much for like people like me who are tone deaf.
Well, we had sent for millions of years. Early humans, they're pretty sure, invented music.
Yeah, well, and you will notice that the really successful chemical introduction of oxytocin is by nasal inhalation. And you go
Yep.
right over the blood-brain barrier there. Whereas you can't give somebody a surge of oxytocin with a pill. And the only way to be as direct as nasal inhalation is intravenous injection. Certainly intramuscular injection doesn't do the trick. Eric?
Yeah,
H-bomb
dictators
is
certainly know the value of music for stimulating aggression and so on, and military music. And I could play one now, sometime from about a Russian popular patriotic song now that's very popular in Russia, called I'm a Russian," or "I am Russian," and also it's been found in with Alzheimer's patients that have a lot of trouble remembering things, just music that they remember from their long ago can bring back a lot of happy memories for them.
Yep.
And it's used in
Yeah.
the trying to make their lives better. I guess called palliative care.
Yeah, music therapy is a big thing. Tom, you're next.
Yeah, the thing about music is part of music can be lyrics, but it's not always
Right.
part of it. And I remember the fuss when Carlos came out with Switched on Bach.
Mhm.
There were people who absolutely hated that, and there were people who absolutely loved it and would have been happy if I just played that album all day long on continuous repeat. It's I often wondered if there was some correlation between playing music. If you knew how to play music, you could read notes and play music, if that meant you liked Bach. But that didn't seem to be
I love Bach. Yeah,
the case.
no, I love Bach, and I can't. I have no
But
ability with music myself.
music hath charms to soothe the savage beast.
It's actually the savage breast.
I was about to say that, but
Really?
Yeah.
Either way, it works.
Yeah.
well,
Ha!
depending on how savage.
Thank you. I've learned something today.
That's
Learned
what
many
we're here
things
for.
today.
Yeah, and real quick, it switched on Bach, turned on Bach. What was that? I don't do words.
Switched on Bach by Walter
Ah,
Carlo, later Wendy
yes,
Carlo.
I binged that for about
It
2,
is
3,
good.
4, 5, 6 weeks.
Yeah.
I could not get enough.
Yeah, as one who does play music, I can attest that it does evoke emotions with the person who actually performs it, not just the listeners.
Okay, I would like to go on
Yes,
fairly
please.
quickly
Okay,
because
good.
Mhm.
Please.
there's a bit of this that I want to have some discussion on. Um,
You better hurry.
okay, subjects with oxytocin levels raised above their baseline became more trusting of others, more generous in economic games, and more empathic, more understanding of others' feelings. Except, and here we get into what I hope will be the heart of our discussion. 5% of humans do not react at all to a surge of oxytocin. It has absolutely no effect on them. Approximately half of these human beings are born without oxytocin receptors. It is a mutation. And it's a genetic problem, you know. You would have to do an awful lot of research and be able to use something like CRISPR to fix this mutation. And there has actually been some research done in that direction, which I will get to later, but it's very preliminary. Okay, the other half were born with normal oxytocin receptors, but had them destroyed. And there tend to be two paths that can totally destroy a person's oxytocin receptors, a person's ability to react to a surge of oxytocin. And the first is that it can be destroyed by a seriously abusive childhood. And this does not mean one traumatic experience. This means basically months and years of fright and pain and fear during childhood. You know,
You are sleeping in a position like this, you are wrecking your body and
okay, thank
Sorry.
you for turning that off.
Yep.
And in adulthood, it is possible to destroy your oxytocin receptors by abusing stimulants. Methamphetamine is always. You can totally mess yourself up with sufficient use of methamphetamine. There are also peripheral uppers that will do this. Cocaine, I think, and but it's always uppers, and unfortunately there's no safe dosage. It varies extremely amongst people how much it takes to totally destroy your, you know, how much meth you have to take for how long to totally destroy your oxytocin receptors, but there's a threshold for every person. H. Tom.
Seriously abused childhood, is that physical abuse or psychological abuse or emotional abuse or
Sexual abuse, probably all the above, right?
All of the above.
any and all? Okay.
All right. I have a very basic question. You were talking about sublingual versus nasal versus intramuscular versus intravenous, and you kept using the term surge in oxytocin. Are we looking for a surge, or are we looking for a nice base level? You know, time release versus, I mean, do you want it to surge?
Yes.
When do you want it to surge?
Well,
Before you do something bad?
No. It surges when you feel good about something, when you're happy, when you are
Right, but you're
joyful.
talking about a chemical way of doing that. And would you rather not have your base level of oxytocin at a certain level? That's rather than high-low, kind of like my caffeine, you know.
All I know is that in all of the research, they talk about a significant increase produces a significant increase over your base levels.
And how long does that last? 10 minutes? 10
Not
10
long.
days? Yeah, okay. Yep, you answered the question.
I think we're talking minutes as a half-life. Okay. Now, here's till we get to the heart of what I've been thinking about discussing. This 5% of the population that does not react to a surge of oxytocin represents 30 to 40% of your typical prison population. I mean, these guys concentrate in prison. And they represent an extrapolated 30% of unimprisoned con men, politicians, bankers, etc., who manage to find loopholes in the system to legally exploit their fellows. In other words, we are talking about people who, for any one of those three reasons, have no oxytocin receptors, feel no empathy for other human beings, and have no inclination whatsoever to be good to other people or to avoid actions that would cause pain to other people. And that's generally considered a bad thing, to have such people running around in your society.
They're sociopaths.
There we go. And I believe sociopath is actually the correct word. They are not psychopaths because they're in perfect contact with reality.
No.
Okay. So, a little historical perspective here. I think the big mistake we have been making all along is the notion that human nature has been unvariable through history, and that human cultures and institutions succeed or fail only to the extent they are compatible with human nature. But you have to realize that, at least in terms of oxytocin, human nature is a composite. And that 5% out there is a real problem. Okay, now this is what I'd like to get into. Is there anything we can do as a society to mitigate the influence of this 5%? Dean, you're
Yeah, you're muted, Dean.
Sorry. Strengthen the institution of marriage. Isn't that what the Christian right is all about? I mean, it is. I'm just saying.
Perhaps it used to be. There are a hell of a lot of divorced men on the Christian right these days.
Oh, yeah. and women.
Um,
The Christian right is not a single thing.
Of course not.
but I think perhaps what we identify as the Christian right is less supportive of sticking with the marriage for the sake of the children than it used to be.
Agreed.
Mhm.
That's all I was saying. Okay, now, this one really intrigues me because you're talking about, okay, that percentage of the population that is born mutated with no oxytocin receptors, right now we can't do anything about, except perhaps keep them out of positions of power. But the percentage of sociopaths that are produced by a bad childhood environment could be saved if there were some way to find them soon after birth. Now, this is the one I'm talking about here, removing children from traumatic family situations. And I made the suggestion here. Most people would have no trouble preventing the oxytocin impaired from adopting, especially adopting young children. But it is almost certain that an oxytocin impaired mother will produce children if she lives with them. If they live with her during their young years, they will end up as sociopaths because they are being taken care of by a mother who neglects them, abuses them, produces a really rotten childhood. And I make the suggestion, I make this suggestion. Would this be valid? Would there be any justification for doing something like this?
Oh, yes.
I mean, we have no problem coming up with very strict rules for adoptive parents.
Social workers do, if there's child abuse going on, they can remove the child from a bad situation.
Yeah, but it is overwhelmingly true that sometimes they find it out, or they are only justified by the system in removing the children after it's too late. And that's why I was suggesting, okay, let's go one step further. Most women these days, even if they're incredibly poor, have their children in a hospital. You know, they are there. We can test their blood. Would we be justified in literally having a social worker remove that child from the woman's custody if she is one of these oxytocin impaired mothers, or
You want to make sure it's not abused, like in a Handmaid's Tale type situation where the rich want to
Let's
take.
please raise our hands. We don't
yeah.
have much time left.
Yeah, we got 4 minutes.
Okay, Jean.
Yeah. Is there a relationship between oxytocin and postpartum depression, which amazingly causes females to murder their newborn infant?
Actually, the children tend to be a few months old by the time they get around to that, but
Oh, okay. You represent the female subspecies here. And then another real quick question. Observationally, it seems like women, when they first are with child, want to produce a male, and maybe because they think that's what their husband wants, and he doesn't always, you know. But you're a female who has had children, so that was a question, Carole.
well, actually, I wanted a daughter, but
Good for you.
I got a son. I'm rather fond of him.
Right. I would have preferred a daughter as my first child, I believe.
It's hard to speak for other women,
Yeah.
but
Well,
I
you're the only one in the room that can. So,
I think women who come from cultures where producing a son is highly valued would tend to go the other way.